for Black History Month, we're at least representing one quarter, right? Between the two of us.
Yes, that is
I'm
true. And
sorry.
no. And for those of you who don't know what the hell Pat's talking about, I should mention, especially because you're very washed out today. You are super white.
I'm super white because I got a lot of light coming into the.
Yes.
I'm so white. I am the first 10 minutes of Watermelon Man. I'm so white.
Yes. And I feel like I need to doubly disclaim what you're talking about now.
All right.
So for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do know, feel free to take a shot because I mentioned this quite a bit. I am half Black. I know it's hard to believe, but my mom was white, my dad was Black. My mom is white, my dad was Black. That's I got the tenses right. And so we are reviewing a movie called Watermelon Man from 1970,
Yes.
directed by Melvin Van Peebles. Now this I had not heard of this film before. And I was
Okay.
curious about what the reception was, what the critical response was. I still don't know, except for what Wikipedia told me. They said it was a big hit, and
Yeah.
the studio actually offered Van Peebles a 3-picture deal, which he turned
Yep.
down.
To do
And Sweetback, right?
badass song.
Yes, which turned out to be an even bigger success on the indie scene. Up until that time, it was the #1 independent film of all time. But I went to Rotten Tomatoes because I'm like, what did my colleagues think of this movie? No one has reviewed it. It's got an audience score, but no critic score. It's the wildest thing.
Crap.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to review it then. I'm
Yeah.
reviewing it. I found a new technique for that, so I'm good.
You writing thoughts and submitting to Rotten Tomatoes?
No. I'll do an audio review and put it up on YouTube, and then I don't have to write anything except the script for the audio.
That's what I've been doing a version of that too.
Yeah.
So and that counts.
It does count, and there's so many people doing this now. It just doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it's criticism is criticism.
I'm
So
60 effing years old. I don't have time to write it anymore.
you've got plenty of time, Pat. So
Yes,
this movie, Watermelon Man, set it up for me. What's this movie about? I watched it. I finished watching it about 45 minutes ago, so it's fresh in my head. But give me the synopsis.
I watched it over the last 2 days as well. Just a quick. This is so easy. So this guy is a typical middle-class dude living in a middle-class white neighborhood of the late 1960s, early 70s. It looks like the Brady Bunch. In fact, one of the kids is played by Joni herself, Erin Moran. And I'll tell you, of all her accomplishments, I say that's one of the coolest ones. She was in Watermelon Man as the daughter of Godfrey Cambridge's character. And when we meet him, of course, he is. Now, what I was complaining about initially is like, he don't look white, for one thing. And then, but when the contrast comes, then you realize how much they worked on making him do whiteface, as they say.
Yeah.
And it starts off so oddly. We see him as sort of an eccentric character. He likes to run. He likes to run at the bus to get to a certain stop so he can get on and actually beat the bus there. And he does it every day. And there's people on the bus who want to go by him and everything. It just, he's obsessed with exercise, and it's taken to a level of like really bad shtick where, now I'm getting too detailed. So he wakes up one morning and he's African-American, or he's Black. He's not white anymore. Now, so basically the rest of the film is him dealing with that. And that is as big a synopsis as you can go. We can go into details when we take up the discussion. But the one thing I want to point out is that there's a whole thing, a book called On Death and Dying by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she gives 5 stages of death. And I wrote them down. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And we see Jeff, Godfrey Cambridge's character, go through all those situations in Suddenly Becoming Black. But I think he deserved an Oscar for the performance. The shtick and the comedy aside, the way he handled that role was quite extraordinary to me. What did you think of that?
That
Yeah,
that gets into what I thought of the movie, which
okay, that's
it
true because he's so
it
connected
didn't
to it.
the Watermelon Man didn't click for me. I
Oh,
understand. I liked part of it, but not quite enough to say that I dug it overall.
okay,
And the part that I liked came very late in the movie, and part of that is because it is so shticky and such a caricature of white culture that I had to constantly recalibrate my brain to think I'm not in 2021. I'm in 1970. This is a very different
right,
perspective, and
right.
I was
That's 50 years ago. You
right.
know,
And after I
it's like
finished the
looking
film,
at Casablanca in the 90s.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, after I watched the film, I went and I looked at Wikipedia, like I said, because I went to Rotten Tomatoes first. My jaw hit the floor. And then I went to Wikipedia and I was reading a bit about the history of it. Now, the writer was Herman Rauscher, who also
Yeah,
wrote The Summer of 42. That was that was this autobiographical drama.
and he's a white writer. This is a
Yes.
white writer writing this film.
And, that I was going to say, obviously, because watching it, I thought this felt like either a black writer who was giving his impression of white culture, or it's a white writer trying to give a black person's impression of white culture. It didn't seem authentic in enough places. And I found out that Melvin Van Peebles, the director, and Rauscher, the writer, constantly clash on the
Yeah,
set over the
yeah,
story because Rauscher, and this comes across in the film, as does Van Peebles' vision, Rauscher wanted to have a straight up satire
yep.
of liberal, white liberal culture.
Limousine liberals, yep.
Right. And then Van Peebles wanted to have more of a black power militancy fable. And they don't quite mix because they're two different perspectives, and those perspectives clash in a lot of ways. And
Well,
I felt the conflict.
one of the things I think you read this in the Wikipedia as well because I just read it too, that Raucher actually wrote the novel. Well, back in those days, there was a novelization of hit movies. If you like Rocky, go and buy the paperback and read it.
Right.
So he took a clause in his contract and he wrote the book. So I'm curious now to read the book because that's more Raucher's vision, and I think the finished product is more, of course, Van Peebles' vision. But you're right, the clash of them makes for some awkwardness. My feeling is all the shtick is Van Peebles. That he wanted to put some sort of take on his own humor in it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And, you'd have to talk to both of them. There was a reference to the DVD, which came out a while ago. I don't know if it's still in print. I'd like to find it because there was a quote from Van Peebles, which I assume came from an interview or a commentary, which I would love to see.
Right.
But going back to your initial question, Godfrey Cambridge's performance, I think it's a hell of a performance. It's just that the writing and the character are so compromised that I was annoyed by him, but I think I was supposed to be. There are
Right.
too many moments in the film where he and his wife, played by Estelle Parsons, who's wonderful, um,
Yeah.
they're just yelling at each other, and there's so much yelling and screaming. And then during key moments, as the volume is escalating, Van Peebles throws onto the soundtrack all this percussive, angry jazz, and I'm like, stop! And maybe that was the
Well,
point, but I had to take several breaks during this movie because I'm like, it's only an hour and a half long, but I felt like I was with these insufferable, miserable people for 6 days.
that's so funny. I What happened when it started out, and interestingly enough, I had seen this movie as a kid because as
Oh,
soon as it started, I said, "Oh, I remember this."
okay.
But what I did is I probably watched it for maybe a half hour and then, saw the transformation and then stopped watching it because I didn't get it. But anyway, the shtick really bothered me initially. When I got into it was after his transformation.
Hmm.
Once he got over the going to get the products and the whole thing with the bathtub and the bargaining and all that. All
So
once that was
just to
all over,
clarify that, just to clarify,
okay,
he goes to a like Walgreens type store in the black part of town.
Right.
It's so cartoonish. He sweeps up all the hair and skin lightening products into a basket and pays with cash. He goes home. He bathes in gallons of milk for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yes.
But I think, again, they're trying to make a point. Once that was all over with and he was Alice in Wonderland, I started really digging this film because I was like, wow, this is such a wild thing to be putting in the midst of the crisis that was occurring in America at that time. I mean, Dr. King had been killed in '68, and the movement was splintering between Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement. So in the crux of this film coming out, there's a lot of different and divergent voices trying to get a foothold again after King's killing. And here, this movie comes out and puts this Alice in Wonderland into the American society. And yeah, there was some really broad stuff associated with that, but there was also some really telling social statements that I think was really taking a shot across the bow of American racism and bigotry. So, I mean, I dug it. I really did.
Yeah, I guess I just would have appreciated, again, one voice telling the story, because for as many
Okay.
illustrations as you point out of the overt and covert bigotry, there are also within the same day in terms of the film time scenes that seem to contradict that. You'll have the really angry, intolerant neighbors who are making threatening phone calls, but then when Jeff Garber, Gerber
Gerber.
Gerber goes into his office, and he's got this, he doesn't, it's unclear if he actually turns black. That's kind of one of the running jokes of the film. Is it
Right.
God, playing a prank on this horrible racist? Because that's one thing we kind of jumped over, is before the
I wouldn't call him
transformation.
a horrible racist. He was just a typical whitey who didn't know what the hell was going on and didn't care. And
No,
then
no,
blamed.
that's a bit too far, because there's a definite contrast, at least in terms of what we see, because he is constantly making racial comments, he's constantly making racial jokes, he's making passes at the women in his office, and to the credit of the people around him, they think he's an insufferable bastard too. It's not like he's palling around at the club with a whole bunch of other people making racist jokes.
Right.
It reminds me a lot of the scene, the short from the Twilight Zone, the movie, a few years later, where
The one where Vic gets his head chopped
Vic
off.
Morrow, yes, he plays a racist who finds himself not dissimilar from this, but placed in a position of being one of the minorities he's constantly persecuting, and that also had the wisdom to say that there was a contrast, because America, for as problematic as it was not a cartoonish stereotype of racism. There's, much as it is today, there are many different levels to people's prejudices. But that's the thing, is I think he was
I just viewed sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can you finish your point? Sorry.
No, I think I had. I was just
Oh,
stammering, so go ahead.
no, I felt he was tweaking his wife a lot too, I think, because she represents the white liberal in it, who, who, and this is this kind of situation we're kind of all in, because as we live our lives day to day and we have to put, food on the table and all that stuff, a lot of families in America, a good percentage of families in America, have no time to even think about politics or race or bigotry. And then when you nail them down in it, they might be the second coming of Dr. Martin Luther King, or they might be able to put a robe on. But the point is, nothing in their lives is mattering to that opinion. Okay, and Raucher wanted to write this film because of this phenomena, that he would constantly hear this white liberal blah 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 blah, but they weren't doing anything. They were just, they were with them, of course, but they weren't going out on the march, or they weren't, volunteering at the at the black church to bring the old people in, or anything like that. I mean, I'm just
Yeah, and
from that point of view, I think that's where his bigotry is going.
well,
So anyway,
I understand that perspective, but it's also because I read that bit about Rauscher too. He was also talking about how he had these people, these friends who would espouse these values, but then sort of in private they would, make the jokes and all that stuff.
right?
To which I say there's more things we can break down there. You're talking about 1960s, 1970s. So these are people that grew up in the 30s, 40s, 50s,
Yeah.
absent any progressive values. So you can't just flip a switch and say, hey, all of a sudden you have to accept everybody and these jokes are no longer okay. So I
No,
think,
no,
right.
I understand
Yeah,
living
but
in that time.
that's I'm not laying this on you. I'm just saying that
No,
when I was reading about that, he was all upset about this. I'm like, well, I can kind of understand, but you also have to cut people a bit of slack from where they're coming from. Not that you condone the behavior, but at least understand where it's coming from, right? But
well,
it's
yeah.
well, it's not necessary. Not in 2021. I'm not saying that, but I'm
No,
saying,
no, I know. But
there
let's
was a
look at
reason the country had to be persuaded for equal rights. Um,
let's look at 1970 from a historical spot, though.
yeah,
The Brown versus the Board of Education was the mid 1950s, which said we can't have segregation in schools anymore. Of course, that was not practiced. And then, of course, the civil rights movement, Montgomery bus boycott, and the rumblings of King, his rise as a figure in leadership. I mean, the 60s were an education in what your attitudes were towards Black people, because it was in the news. It was something to study. You're an adult person. You have to look beyond your blinders and see something. I'm not saying they did, or maybe they had the same attitude that they had in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. But I'm saying by 1970, someone would have had to sit down at the table and say, okay, uh, I should know something right now about the Black condition in America.
Possibly, but that's also no. I'm serious,
No,
because
I like,
that's also sort of a 2021 perspective, because that assumes that people had time, that they had more leisure time than we had now. That also assumes that information traveled in the same way at the same speed. It's very easy for someone to become woke nowadays with the glut of information. But if you're, a suburban housewife living in an all white neighborhood, and all of a sudden you hear about this movement, it's going to be scary. I mean, we get a bit of that in the opening bits of this. We're talking about race riots on TV and, all this unrest and calling in the federal government. I mean, it sounds so very 2020, but it can be an intimidating thing. I think they play with that in the movie when Jeff, as his Black self, is running to catch the bus. It's no longer this cute thing that the wacky guy in the neighborhood does. It's this scary Black guy. The only Black guy in like 50 miles from here is running through the neighborhood, knocking people over. There's white women screaming while they're watering their lawns.
so hilarious.
That's kind of effective satire. But no,
The
I think,
Well, also in the counterpoint to like thinking about in 2021 terms, again, as an old man, I happen to remember that our news was filtered through silos, and you had the newspaper and you had the television broadcast news. So there was more of a commonality about news back then. Now you could ignore it, especially if you're raising kids and doing this and that, or you're, even painting your house or whatever. Everything, life happens, and not necessarily everybody is up on the news. What has happened today, of course, is that people go to the news that makes them most feel comfortable. But back then, you didn't have that luxury. If you're gonna get mainstream publications, you're gonna see what was happening on the streets of Montgomery and Birmingham and Memphis, and you're gonna know that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and you're gonna know what he stood for,
Mhm.
unless you are completely out of touch with that. There was no Fox News to say, Martin Luther King is nothing. Don't pay attention to him. It was just three networks siloing the news, and you had newspapers, magazines, etc.
Well,
So
sure, but
it was a different news environment, a different information environment. I'm not forgiving anything in the movie. I'm just trying to put it in perspective.
I know, and I understand that, but with that siloing, I mean, it's not like all of the news networks were carrying the same progressive message. It's not like the
Right.
newspapers all across the country are saying, hey, there's this Martin Luther King guy. He's really great, especially in particular
No, they
regions
weren't
of the
saying
country, right?
that. They were
So,
not saying that.
so even if you are keeping up on the news, it still kind of depended on, what news you were getting, where you were getting it from, and also what your community was interpreting about that news.
Okay.
Um, so yeah,
Before
again,
this
it's
evolves
hard to
into
get,
a discussion about media, relative
but
medias.
I think it's kind of important because it's hard to watch. Putting up the title of this for this video is going to be difficult enough because it's an offensive title. So I think talking about the context in which the movie was made is kind of important. And instead of just saying, yeah, we love this movie about a white guy who turns black and it's called Watermelon Man. And his wife serves him fried chicken for their big meal together.
And then we're on Twitter, and then we're canceled. I know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were canceled when we conceived of doing this show, but
Now that's a good point, though. Here it is. This is available on Amazon Prime, which a lot of people have.
Yeah, for free. It's one of the it's
Free,
with yeah.
And I was watching it very carefully as to say, okay, does this film have relevance today, without saying, well, the title aside, of course. And that title is also the name of one of the greatest jazz compositions in the 1960s by Herbie Hancock, Watermelon Man. Go listen to it on YouTube. You're just like be blown away. I was like, where's Watermelon Man? Where's the jazz Watermelon Man? But I forgot Melvin Van Peebles did all the music. So that's why he had all that percussive stuff. Hey, well, we put some of my music right there. That would be a good spot for it.
I love this.
I don't know Van Peebles, so go ahead.
Well, I do want to say this movie has one of the most provocative and cool posters I've ever seen. It's on Wikipedia. It's the picture of
cool.
It's Cambridge. He's got the half black, half white face and a watermelon with American flag colors on it. And the tagline is, "A funny thing happened to Jeff Gerber. It won't happen to you, so you can laugh."
Oh my God. I didn't read the fine type. That's great.
Yeah, it's cheeky as hell. But the thing is, like, there's so much broad strokes. I know what my original point was before we got on this tangent. You have the overt racist, but then you have when he goes into his office, you've got the secretarial pool who are looking at him. They are looking at him askance, but they're not like ducking under their desks and freaked out. They're like, what happened to Jeff? Because it's made very clear that, especially because he was just wearing kind of like white makeup. And initially they were talking about getting Alan Arkin or Jack Lemmon to play the white version of him. I think that would have actually, they could have, given everything they do in this movie, they could have done that. I don't know that
if they would have split the character and had a black man play the black version, yes, but they couldn't have done blackface.
No, I think they were talking. No, they were talking about just having those actors do the white portion of the film before the transformation, not Jack Lemmon in blackface. Oh my God, we are so canceled.
I'm gonna just go a quick aside because I watched The Jazz Singer last week, the Neil Diamond version, which I've never seen. Okay. So as everybody who knows film knows, The Jazz Singer is the first talking picture in history, 1927. It stars Eddie Cantor. The plot's exactly the same. His father is a cantor in the Jewish church. He wants his son to go with him, but his son wants to go and do pop music. In that film, there's a very infamous blackface scene, which pretty much is canceled except in historical context. Mm-hmm. Go to the Neil Diamond film, 1980, co-starring, by the way, Lucy Arnaz is the love interest. Neil Diamond is the lead and Lucy Arnaz is the love interest. Take my money, please. Anyway, there's a scene where he has to fill in for a soul group and he does blackface.
Neil Diamond?
Wow. Neil Diamond did blackface in Jazz Singer.
Wait, do you know if Neil Diamond's still alive?
Yes, he's still alive.
Because I feel like I should.
He's in his 70s or 80s by now, but yeah, he's still alive.
I feel like I should edit this portion out so Neil Diamond doesn't get canceled because someone's right now like, oh my God.
Hey, it's available on Amazon Prime. You can go and see it.
Stop. No. National treasure and
Love on the run.
and blackface perpetrator Neil Diamond.
But in the end, just a quick thing. In the end, it's one of the best worst movies ever. So go and watch it. But anyway,
Okay.
but back to
but I was going to say, the key to this and part of the mystery is what changed him black. You know, there is a really long and very tired, drawn out scene about maybe it's my sun lamp, because in addition to his exercise routine, he goes under a tanning lamp, you know, before he goes to bed and right when he wakes up in the morning. So he's like, maybe this is a malfunction. But it's clear that his features are not changed at all. He looks the same black as he did white. So it's just a skin tone change. So when he goes back into the office, people are looking at him funny. And then he keeps getting strange looks every time he comes back into the office. That could be read as, you know, overt racism. Oh my God, there's a black guy walking in. But the way I read it was, it's this guy who's been working here for years. All of a sudden this freak thing happened to him. So if he's coming back in the office, I wonder if he's changed back.
Well, that was the thing. And to the outside world, yeah, he's black, you know, running down the street, you know, chasing the bus. Yeah, the cops are there and everybody's freaking out. But to the people around him, surrounding him, once his wife figures out it's not an intruder, you know, they have to, in their own souls, accept him for who he is now. He's still the same person. He just happens to be black, or his pigmentation is darkened. It has nothing to do with who he is. He's still the same, you know. I think you'd call him out a bit on his racism after that. But hey, that looks like a big bit of karma, my friend.
And we also have the blonde Swedish secretary.
Norway, sir.
Norway, sorry. Her name was Erica. I got that much.
Yes, she was played by Kay Kimberly.
And she was originally played by Madeline Kahn in Blazing Saddles. I was like so disappointed in that.
Bad accent. I don't think did he have a, here brings up another point. I don't think Peebles could handle actors. I felt that some of the performances were way off.
Oh, you want to talk about the lead neighbor when they confront him in his living room?
I believe that was satire, but I also believe that he just didn't give a darn about casting certain people. Either Peebles didn't care about certain people. It's just like I didn't get some of the stuff. I was really like, God.
Well, there is a scene later in the film when Jeff's life completely starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
And he starts to learn some real humility about the world that he's now living in. He goes home, his wife's there with 5 guys from the neighborhood, and they're all there basically to say, like, in no uncertain terms, our property values are going to plummet. So we've gotten together with 2 banks and everyone in the community to, your house is worth $40,000. We'll pay you $50,000 to leave, and you've got 2 weeks. Now, in a wonderful scene of negotiation, he talks them up and up and up past their, like, we can't go any higher than 60. And then he's like, well, you know, I might just start making a lot of barbecue around here and fried chicken. And like, okay, 70. He's like, oh, but I thought you were capped at 60. I'm not going to spoil the rest of the scene, except to say the guy who is the main big fat piece of crap who is, you know, trying to negotiate with him was one of the worst actors I have seen in any production. Jeff, we can't go any higher than 50. Jeff, think about your family.
Between him and the obviously American woman playing a Norwegian woman, who later had to do a nude scene, by the way.
That was surprising. Because they did so much to cover everything up that I was like, wow, that's boing.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty wild. And also, too, a very telling scene. Again, it's sort of built upon itself. And once it started to get away from the highly comic elements of it, it started to steer in a direction that I thought evolved the film nicely, which is why I think I liked it more than you did. I just saw the evolution of where it was for me, the evolution was proper and intriguing, and it came out to me a great conclusion. One of the great uses of freeze frame I've seen in the movie. I will say no more.
I I still got, I don't know what I mean, I just finished watching this, so I haven't really had time to think about the ending. The
Right,
ending is really, as the kids say, problematic for me because of what, the whole idea of racism, or at least the kind of on the surface idea of it, is not liking people because they look different, judging people by the color of their skin.
right,
I feel like this whole movie is trying to say it's still the same man underneath, unfortunately, because this guy is not, he has a lot of lessons to learn, but it's just a matter of skin color. If his skin had been white the entire film, then no one would have had a problem with him and he would have just continued living his ignorant life. At the end of the film, after he's lost everything,
right.
he moves to, the black part of the city. He opens up his own business, which was, really cool, and he just develops his own life, and he, sits at a bar he goes to and watches a stripper up on the bar, and,
That
has some
was an odd
drinks.
scene and very extended too.
Right. But my point is,
In this sense, I wouldn't even say spoiler alert. Let's not give away the ending because it's so intriguing.
well, okay, we'll dance around it then because it's
Okay,
important to what I'm saying.
okay,
That whole sequence, aside from the call with Althea, his, now estranged wife, it's all done in montage. So the only real interaction he has with black people is, Mantan Moreland playing the soda jerk at the beginning of the movie, and then the bus driver who kind of helps get him out of that situation where he's running down the street, gets caught up, with the police and all that. I thought that was going to be the beginning of something, of him, like, for lack of a better term, integrating with the African American community and kind of learning about stuff. But no, the whole thing is very insular, back to his house, his office, the same people he's dealing with,
interesting point.
right? So when he moves to the black part of town after losing everything, since it's all done in montage, what I'm taking from that is he's black. He can just slip into that culture and be fine. So race is apparently all about skin color. It has nothing to do with culture or personality. Did he have to tamp down those racist inclinations? Like, is it just because he lost everything that he decided, hey, maybe being, white isn't so great, and, black people are equal and all that stuff? We never see him learning anything except
Hmm.
by the scenes that the movie is giving us. And so, particularly in that last moment, I did not believe that he would end up in that room with those people and being accepted by those people. And
Interesting.
when I say those people, I'm not trying to use that in the derogatory. I'm just trying not to spoil who he was in the room with.
Right, right,
Those particular people that in that scene.
right. The see, I will say, in counter to that is his evolution. It was a series of indoctrinations, and by the time he got to the montage area, we'd realize he'd come to the other side of the curtain. He had fully in the Kubler-Ross thing. He was on acceptance, and in that acceptance, we see the montage of him, his changed lifestyle. Now, what's to say who he's interacting with and who he isn't interacting with is not the question. The question is, the other side of the curtain, and he's fully fully getting into where he is at. He's also feeling the anger. He's feeling the anger, and the anger's starting to build a bit. And maybe it comes to the point of the conclusion. Again, I think we just looked at it slightly differently, but we're on the same pathway. It's just veering in different directions.
My my concern, I understand what you're saying, but my
Yes,
concern is the way the film presents it, and it's being presented by a black filmmaker who wanted to present an image of black power, who was struggling with a screenwriter who wanted to focus on the liberal satire. And this is where I
right,
think the oil and water part, clash. Is Jeff loses everything. His wife leaves him with the kids. he quits he loses his job in one of the weirdest montages. Like there's a freeze frame and title cards, and all of a sudden, like it goes from his boss lecturing
That's
him
so
in
odd.
what you think is like the worst pep talk in the world, to I guess he's fired, to he's seeing his black doctor, to he's working in a junkyard, and then he walks off the job, kind of a thing. So after everything, he has nothing from this white world he was living in. So the fact that he accepts his fate, it seems more like the black culture that he is forced to go into because he has nowhere else to go is almost like the consolation prize of American society. Now, if you want to make some kind of a broader political point, you need to do that more than the last 5 minutes of the movie, because it kind of borders on offensive. It's like he kind of has to accept it, because otherwise, why doesn't he just go kill himself?
Well, I still think you have to consider the gradual movement of the character throughout the film. It was not like he went from one end of the chessboard to another. He went through all the spaces along the way. I mean, you can only take it scene by scene in context. The neighbors trying to sell buy his house so he'll move out. The wife that leaves him for not really particularly any reason, just that she didn't sign up for this,
Yes.
but he's not a different person. So gradually, I would think all of that circumstantial stuff, and then the whole silent film title card thing. Again, to me, it was back to the satire, back to the broad shtick. The only job he can get is as a junkyard dog and all that stuff, and and uh, and that could have made him angry too. I mean, there's a great scene where he's stripping off his onesie and he's walking with his suit again. I was like,
But
this.
that, yeah, and that's, that to me spoke more of, I'm white, I shouldn't have to be doing any of this,
Right.
And I think again, the portion where everything falls apart for him, I think is the strongest part of the movie, because you're starting to see
Right.
him in the performance, most of all, getting away from the comedy and getting a glimpse at what this could have been if it had been not necessarily a straight drama, but even a lighter comedy with heavier drama in it, rather than mostly a farce with some social commentary. It's just the way that I think it was the filmmaking got in the way of telling a more well-rounded story. I think there need to be a couple of scenes with him talking. Maybe he reconnects with the bus driver when he's on his way down this ladder, so the bus driver can tell him, "Look, you're losing everything, but we're not a consolation prize. This is a very rich culture, and we will, we're used to being put down so you'll fit right in, but this isn't like a free pass, right? Just
It's
because you're not white anymore doesn't make you black."
I would have welcomed a scene like that, but I can't. At the same time, I can't imagine it being in the film.
I wonder if
To
it's in the
me, if
book.
if I want, yeah, I'd like to read the book, but to me, to use a literary comparison, if this movie was a book, I would call it an absurdist book. I would call it what would be similar to like some of the Terry Southern books, like Candy or
Or
Myra
like
Breckin.
maybe like Being There.
Yeah, well, Being There is a good example. Myra Breckinridge, um, uh, Candy, the Terry Southern book, who also wrote the screenplay for Doctor Strangelove. So Terry Southern was just an absurdist thinker, and his literature was very absurdist. One chapter might have nothing to do with the next chapter, but then it starts to mesh as it gets to the end. So I consider this movie almost like an absurdist novel. But I also, one of the reasons I'm glad that you sort of had a counterpoint to it is you are pointing out the things that I was forgiving it for that I shouldn't have. But especially the great thing about the soundtrack is that it was so misused at times. I was like, for one thing, they would have a song that had nothing to do with what he was doing, which fine, but it's still.
It's
This
not a
is what
choice. And
happens when the director writes the music for the movie.
yeah, and then like almost like these mini music videos too, like there'd be these flashing multicolored gels over these weird moments. I don't know. I don't understand what I
Well,
was
how
looking at.
about the transition scene, which I thought was kind of clever? As you recall, the camera pans up. This is changes. He goes to
Go to the
goes
bathroom,
bed.
right?
Last night is white. He's going to wake up as black.
Hmm.
So the camera pans up to the pictures that are behind the bed, and
Hmm.
suddenly we see flames reflected in those pictures.
First it's water, and then it's flames. There's like crashing oceans behind them. Yeah.
It was really kind of compelling. And then, the camera pans down, and then after he gets up and discovers he's black, you have these gels, colored gels. He was taking out the whole train kit to kind of the cutaway. He was doing some audacious cutaways. Like he'd be in one position, and suddenly the cut would be you'd see his feet, and then the next cut would be his eyes. It was almost like a Dada film,
like comics or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I was wondering about the flames too. I thought, oh, maybe this will make more sense later, but they don't really refer to it. I wonder if it's because what happens when he wakes up is his version of hell. It's like,
Sure. It's like his life is burning up. It was I have to mention this before we go. The delivery man. You remember him? He was going to bring in the.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that turned into. I'm not going to say I was upset by it, but I was disturbed by how that scene ended up.
It was very disturbing, but the actor is named Emil Sitka, Sitka, Emil Sitka.
Okay.
Or Sitka if the I is long, and he was known for being in the Three Stooges shorts. He
Really?
played multiple roles throughout his career in the Three Stooges shorts. Now get this. He, in 1970, 70 is a pivotal year for a lot of people in this film, okay? Besides the director. Emil was supposed to take over for Larry because Larry had had a stroke, and they were going to do one more movie with Curly, Joe DeRita, Mo, and Emil. They even took publicity pictures. And
Wow.
this was the same year that was happening. So Emil was about to join the Three Stooges.
How old were the rest of the Stooges at this point?
They were super old, but they wanted to keep it going because the TV stuff was huge and they weren't making a dime off it. That was the problem.
Yeah.
Frickin' Columbia Pictures, I don't want to go into it. They really screwed those guys. So
Well, that's like all entertainers were screwed back in the day.
who was the guy that hired him to be the junkyard dog? The great Paul Williams, the composer, the
Yes.
3-foot-tall composer. 1970, he wrote, "We have only just begun." The Carpenters was about to record it. He was going to take off like a rocket.
Yeah, I
think it was
did
his
a
first
double.
film.
Was it? I did a double take because I was like, is that Paul Williams or is that Cousin Oliver from the Brady Bunch? They're about the same height.
They were about the same height at that time. I interviewed Cousin Oliver.
Oh, you
And
did?
I really complimented him because I watch a lot, that was my era of television. So I said, dude, when I would see you on, because once he came in and he did a shtick with John Denver because he looked like him. And he was Ted Baxter's son in the last episode of Mary Tyler Moore. So he did stuff besides Cousin Oliver. I said, you were right inside the culture, bro. You were right in the TV culture. And he kind of like, yeah, I was, wasn't I?
Decades of therapy, and all he needed was one compliment from Pat the Uber critic McDonald.
Finally, somebody appreciates my zeitgeist.
I appreciate your zeitgeist.
So from 1 to 10, how would you rate his white face?
I thought you were going to ask me how to rate the movie, but you want me to rate his white face. 1 to 10? Oh,
yeah.
From 1970 perspective, maybe an 8. From 2021, probably a 3. That's the thing, is like, because I think back about it. I don't know how to approach this question because it was 1970. This is 18 years before Coming to America, where it's like where Eddie Murphy was playing all these different characters with this wonderful makeup. I was thinking about the movie White Chicks, where the Wayans brothers were playing white blonde women, and I thought that makeup was more convincing. Because you're right, you brought this up. Cambridge, when he's in whiteface, he just kind of looks like a very light-skinned African American.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. I mean, as soon as the movie started, I said, I don't believe this guy is white for a second. Nothing wrong with that. No cancel culture thing about that.
Yeah.
It's just, you just don't believe it.
Yeah. I think they did the best that they could. Going back to that absurdist thing, there is a scene. I think the movie took like an hour too long to get going, because so much of it is him bitching in his house about being black, and they'll these like little like cartoon comic strip schemes about how to turn his skin white. The one that I thought was great, talking about those cuts, is it cuts from some scene, I don't remember what it was, but to a close-up of him covered in this like paper mache oatmeal combination with a straw hanging out, drinking milk. I'm like, this is like Albert Brooks insanity. I love this.
It was so surreal. And how long did that painfully go on? At least 10 minutes. I don't know. It probably was 1 minute, but it seemed like 10.
No, it was about 10, because I kept looking at the runtime like, Jesus Christ.
Carefully, she's trying to use a hammer to take this thing. And then, like the Phantom of the Opera, part of his face comes out and he screams again.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say it wasn't funny in parts.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is like, I thought
it's a pretty good comedy.
There are comedy moments in it that work really well, but as a comedy, I don't think it quite works, because it's got this Apatow sensibility where we're just going to let this thing play itself out. Like, the scene can be 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be 8.
Bringing up Judd Apatow in association with this movie.
Yeah, I make connections.
The scene after he made love to the Norwegian secretary. Spoiler alert.
It's true. No,
he kept saying it was an old wives' tale, which I thought was funny.
Yeah,
but he kept saying, well, we should make love, every night and during lunchtime and whenever we can. He goes, we should take some time out to vote.
Yes. And there's some,
that line come from?
But there's some fun writing in this movie, these like little lines and asides that are just in these deserts of scenes that I just couldn't hook into. But again, that scene towards the end where he makes the decision, like he cheats on his wife with this woman, because his wife is essentially said in no uncertain terms, the very liberal progressive wife at the beginning of the film, who's talking about, he's complaining about like, why are all these protests on the TV? And she's like, well, maybe we should listen and hear what they have to say. By the end of it, she's like, we're not going to have sex again until this goes back to what it was.
Well, yeah. And it was a perfect thing about being actually confronted with a decision of having to make a decision about your feelings. And suddenly they're completely opposite to what you've been espousing all along when you actually have to experience it. So,
yeah, I think what I kept thinking about is, and this would never happen, at least not today. It would be great if someone were to remake Watermelon Man, but with modern filmmaking sensibilities, like a keener sense of timing and editing and casting for sure. Not the leads. I think they did fine, right? But
not one of the discarded substitute stooges as the delivery man.
Yeah, still yikes. But
that was another scene that went on for about 5 minutes too long.
Well, and the thing that sort of offended me by it is because the wife, Althea, the delivery man comes in with these 2 big boxes, and she's like, oh, we didn't order anything. He's like, oh, these are sun lamps, because the sun lamp company said if something malfunctions, we'll send you a replacement. So Jeff from the next room hears the word sun lamps. It sends him into a rage. He practically rips through the wall, Bugs Bunny style, and starts attacking this delivery guy. And Althea tries to rip them apart. She grabs a chair from the dining room and starts attacking her husband like he's a lion. Don't get me wrong, the guy is in a complete animalistic rage. And I'm like, what the hell are you trying to say about black people here? Like, this is really weird.
And Ironically, it was a guy who'd probably been eye poked by Curly about 3 or 4 times.
I felt like I was getting eye poked like every 5 minutes in this movie, but that's just me.
Well, I'm telling you, I think it's a great discovery. It's not, you're talking, I am going to review this film this weekend, and hopefully, maybe I'll use the stars so the title is obscured.
See, no, what I love.
Maybe that's why they don't do it. They didn't do it.
What I know that you can find a Watermelon Man entry on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. What I would love, I want you to review this movie. I want you to review it positively so that Watermelon Man can have a 100% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, let's name our ratings right now. What's your rating out of 5?
Damn it.
First, you won't answer the question about the makeup. No.
It's less of a trap. No.
I liked how you got out of that, though. So
Thanks.
We'll leave it at that.
I think I'd give it. I got to give it a 3.5.
Oh, that's good.
It's because I think a 3 is I'm just recommending it. A 0.5 is because even though I didn't like it, I think there's a lot to think about in the movie, from the social commentary to the filmmaking
techniques,
to
use of lenses,
use of Nordic secretaries. Anyway,
I'm giving it 4 out of 5, which is only a half star up from you.
Yeah,
and I took a half star off after this conversation because I didn't consider. I was going to go 4.5 out of 5, but your considerations were so sound that, it's almost like when you see a movie and you don't like it and you're going to interview the director, okay? You go in, the director's charming, you connect on the points you liked, and you start going, and you come out and you're saying that's an extra half star or that's an extra star, because it's all the human element of it. It's not just the film itself, it's the human reaction to it. And that's why, I mean, your points were so magnificently valid. I was like, even though I didn't agree with a lot of them, I'm like, I could see, after seeing that movie, I can see where you could go on that journey. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And I want to turn that compliment back around to you, because I think this got an extra half star from me after talking to you. So between the two of us, we gave this movie an extra star.
This is the greatest Black History Month ever.
What does that even mean?
It doesn't mean anything. Go see Watermelon Man. No.
I was just going to say, I don't think there's a poster that could have "This is the greatest Black History Month ever" from Pat McDonald.
Pat Uber Craig McDonald, whose career has ended.
On that note, thank you very much for recommending this movie. And
I'm so glad. It really, all kidding aside, this is actually an interesting film to watch for Black History Month, and for both white and Black people. I mean, just to see what 1970 was like in kind of a nutshell, it makes commentary on it, and like Ian and I, you will get some other view of it, but that's why I'm recommending it highly, 4 out of 5. And note that there's going to be flaws in it, but if you stick with it, you're going to really think about it afterward, as Ian said.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be thinking about this for a while. And after we get off here, I'm going to see if I can find a copy of that book if it's still in print, because I'm very curious. But cool. Yeah. Cool. All right, sir. Well, thank you very much. We'll talk about something else in March.
We'll figure out something for March. I've got some things in mind. Don't forget the Dick Van Dyke remake with the cast of it, except for Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore. That movie I mentioned last month. I got on a tangent. I can't finish.
I can barely remember conversations that I had a week ago. So
you've been having a heck of a ride, bro.
Yeah, we'll catch up and we'll talk offline and we'll figure out what that is. Yes. Thanks, man. Take care. All right. Bye.